Good morning. Iraq votes. The Iraqi people are taking the first step toward establishing a new and independent government. This as insurgents make good on their promises. Today, Sunday, January 30th, 2005.
From NBC News, this is a special edition of Today.
Welcome to Today. I'm Campbell Brown, reporting to you live from Baghdad.
And I'm Lester Holt, joining you from inside Studio 1A in New York. Good morning, everyone. And after years of oppression, it is decision day for the Iraqi people, Campbell.
That's right, Lester. For many Iraqis, this is the very first time they are voting in a free election, but it has come with the violence that many predicted. Here in Baghdad, attacks by insurgents began about 2 hours after the polls opened. There were suicide bombings and mortar attacks on polling places in the capital and elsewhere around the country, leaving at least 27 people dead. But many voters defied the threat and made the brave journey to the polls to cast their vote for the future. Turnout appears to have been high in the south as long lines have been reported at some of the polling centers. However, there has been low turnout, it looks like, in the Sunni triangle. Sunni extremists fearing victory by the Shias have called for a boycott, claiming no vote held under a U.S. military occupation is legitimate. Meantime, the country today is still in a virtual lockdown. The Iraqi military and police are guarding polling stations while 150,000 American forces are on patrol. All civilian traffic is banned and borders remain closed. Coming up in just a few moments, we will take you on patrol with American troops here in Baghdad as they try to protect polling places. Plus, we're going to go inside one of the polling sites as Iraqis cast their ballots. We'll also tell you why women candidates here are in greater danger than men when they put their names on the ballots. And we'll introduce you to some of the women who are taking the risk. Lester?
And Campbell, meantime, President Bush is in Washington getting ready for the State of the Union. He's, of course, watching today's election in Iraq very closely. This morning, we're going to take a look at the political ramifications this election could have for the commander-in-chief. Also, NBC nightly news anchor Brian Williams speaks with Iraq's interim Prime Minister Iyad Allawi about today's election and the country's future.
But first, let's turn to NBC's Richard Engel here with me in Baghdad for the very latest on the ground. Richard?
Campbell, there have been attacks, at least 14 in Baghdad alone. Now it appears that at least 30 people have been killed. Still, many Iraqis themselves consider today's elections to be more successful than they expected.
Men, women, young and old, some
defiance that they will not be intimidated by the threats. But voter turnout could be more than 65%. Campbell?
NBC's Richard Engel. Thanks, Richard. And now let's get a check of the rest of the day's top stories. For that, we send it back to New York and MSNBC's Amy Robach, who is at the news desk this morning. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Campbell. Iraqi Americans are casting their votes for the interim Iraqi government for a third and final day here in the United States. NBC's Kevin Tibbles is at a polling center in Rosemont, Illinois. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Amy. The polls are open here in suburban Chicago, and while just 10% of those Iraqis living in the United States actually registered to vote in this election, those who are coming here to mark their ballots hope it makes a difference. Much celebration among those who are voting here. All are now looking forward and hoping for a safer future in Iraq. Amy?
Kevin Tibbles in Rosemont, Illinois. Kevin, thank you. President Bush is spending the weekend in Washington, where he is monitoring the election in Iraq. NBC's Rosalind Jordan is at the White House with the very latest from there. Good morning, Rosalind.
And good morning to you, Amy. All week long, the president has been saying that this election is a success, mainly because it is taking place as scheduled. You'll remember there was a lot of pressure to delay the vote because of the security situation inside Iraq. Now, as you said, the president is here in Washington this weekend. He's working on his State of the Union address. He is also getting updates not just on the vote, but also on the security situation. Yesterday,
Amy, thanks very much. Just found out they'll get a thaw in the south there. That's pretty nasty stuff.
Down at Atlanta Hartsfield, they only had 10% of their arrival and departure flights go off yesterday, so it's going to be a big catch-up day today. It is going to get warmer down in the southeast, but take a look at the freeze line right through Maryland, portions of Delaware and Virginia. Snow on the north side of that. Philadelphia could pick up 1 to 3 inches. D.C. will be icy with slushy snow, 1 to 2 inches. Dover up to 4 inches. We had a light dusting here in New York, heavier amounts in southern New Jersey. And that's a look at weather. Let's go live now back to Baghdad with Campbell Brown.
Thanks, Ian. As we mentioned earlier, the curfew remains in effect, and Baghdad is still in lockdown. Is still in lockdown today. We were able to go out and patrol through the city, though, with 1 battalion from the 1st Cavalry and get into one of the main Baghdad polling centers. A look now at what this day was like for some Iraqis who were able to vote and for some of the U.S. military trying to protect them.
It's just before dawn, and Captain Neil Mayo stops for tea with this Iraqi police officer.
We're all one team together working toward the same goal.
We're just outside one of 6 polling sites in Mayo's district at the start of the day.
What's your sense this morning? It's so quiet out on the street.
This is pretty indicative of many mornings before curfew. I think you'll see here in the next several hours that the streets will be packed with people.
It's 7 a.m. now. Curfew has just ended. Mayo says these are the most worrisome hours.
If they plan to conduct any large-scale attacks, I think it will be this morning to discourage people from leaving their homes.
Car traffic has been banned. The only vehicles on the road are U.S. and Iraqi military or election officials with special credentials. Reports come in that several cars with official decals were stolen overnight. Our patrol is in charge of the roads. We can hear explosions in the distance, but it's too early to know if polling sites have been hit. Here, where people are casting their ballots, U.S. forces hang back. The Iraqi military and police are in charge.
We're at a polling station in the Karada district of Baghdad. It's 9 a.m. local time. This polling station's been open for about 2 hours. There are some people here, but overall it's been quiet, and election officials say there is a sense that people are waiting to see what happens this morning before they turn out.
Voters are searched twice outside. Inside the polling station, it is an undeniably historic moment and deeply meaningful for the people casting ballots. But there are also hiccups.
Tell me what happened when you tried to vote.
This man tells me election workers say he's at the wrong location and has to vote at a different site. But with cars banned, it's too far to walk. This man has the same complaint.
I'm not going to wait for this. I'm going to go there walking, even if it's going to take me 2 or 3 hours.
Outside, though, this woman was successful and shows off her inked finger proving it. Captain Mayo's team is hovering on the perimeter, on alert, but relieved, he says, that nothing has happened in their district so far.
You can see, even at the last polling station, the Iraqi security forces are truly the ones that are making this environment secure today.
The violence isn't going to end today, though. What do you think happens next?
Right. I think we continue to build on the relationship. Today, again, is a great example of the partnership with the Iraqi security forces. I think it will only get better over time until we get to the point where they are trained to the point of proficiency that they can secure Iraq itself.
And you guys can go home.
Yes, ma'am.
And we want to thank Captain Mayo and his guys for taking us out today. Joining me now in Baghdad is NBC Nightly News anchor Brian Williams, who's spent some time today with Iraq's interim Prime Minister, Iyad Allawi. What was his take on the day?
Well, begin with the way over to see Iyad Allawi. A lot of the same conditions you encountered, Campbell, on the streets. This city in lockdown is probably the way a lot of Americans envisioned it right after the war, instead of the street scenes we did see and the looting and the kind of general controlled chaos. So it's with that in mind, and with an American armored vehicle at every corner, that we sat down with Iyad Allawi, who was really unable to discuss the effort here in Iraq except in terms of a full partnership with the United States.
I definitely feel and subscribe that we are going to face the terrorism for quite a while, not only in Iraq, but in the region and beyond. And we have seen what is happening in Saudi Arabia, now Kuwait and Russia and other places. And this probably would only increase, and we need to close ranks.
He expressed optimism about the future and, along with all public officials here, says that today, Election Day, is the first day of the new Iraq. But what we have, as you've been making clear, is this kind of unquantifiable day so far. There has been violence. Since you've been on the air, I think we had 4 mortar volleys within a few miles of our camera location. We've had another either car or suicide bomber about 2 miles away from where we're standing. So that's the framework around which Iraqis are voting today.
Still a dicey situation and a long way to go. NBC anchor of NBC Nightly News. You'll be hosting Nightly News tonight from here as well. Thank you, Brian Williams.
Thanks,
and we'll be back right after this.
President Bush is praising Iraqis for their courage and says the U.S. involvement in Iraq will not end after today's election. Howard Fineman is the chief political correspondent for Newsweek. Howard, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
From a political point of view for the U.S., is the hardest part of this struggle and transition now in the rearview mirror, or still does it lie ahead?
Well, there are many more difficult passages.
That insurgents did strike and shed blood today, that there was lower turnout in Sunni areas. But did the president set a bar that he easily crossed today?
Well, everything...
Excuse for avoiding it. America's influence is not unlimited. But fortunately for the oppressed, America's influence is considerable, and we will use it confidently in freedom's cause.
Let's talk about freedom's cost and what it means in terms of this. Sure. And we'll be right back.
Still ahead on today, more on the Iraqi election. In our next half hour, I'll take a look at some of the women who are on the ballot and are not letting fear and intimidation get in the way of their candidacy.
Plus, Michael Jackson's trial is set to begin on Monday in California. The pop star expected to be in the courtroom as jury selection gets underway. We'll take a look at what his presence, what effect that could have during that selection process. We're back after these messages.
The Iraqi elections. Can the new government assert its authority and establish order? And what role does the U.S. play now? Ryan Williams live in the Middle East, reporting America's story. NBC Nightly News with Ryan Williams, Monday.
Good morning, everyone. It's 8:26.
A look at your forecast is straight ahead, but first, Glastonbury.
Questions about why Stratford-based Sikorsky lost the half-century-old deal it had to build presidential helicopters. Critics wonder whether Lockheed Martin won the $6 billion Marine One.
Going to look at that forecast. Here is meteorologist Art Horn. Art.
A historic day for the people of Iraq as voters head to the polls and cast their vote for the future against a backdrop of both fear and hope. And welcome back, everyone, on this Sunday morning. I'm Lester Holt here in New York. Campbell Brown is joining us live in Baghdad. And Campbell, I understand you've been hearing explosions even since we've come on the air this morning.
That's right, Lester. They have been, frankly, pretty continuous. And let me just show you. You can see actually 2 plumes of smoke behind me. One is supposed to be there. It's an oil refinery. But just next to it is smoke that is not supposed to be there. Again, we believe it's from one of the explosions that we have heard since we have been on the air. There have been several, and we should point out to people and stress that this isn't over yet. In the meantime, though, the final results of the election are also not expected for about 10 days, although election officials are looking at ways now to try to speed up that process. This is a complex election, though. There are over 7,000 candidates who are running for National Assembly seats, and 33% of those candidates, we should point out, are women. And I'll have more in this half hour on Iraq's female voice, what is soon to be a very powerful voice, coming up in just a moment. Lester.
Well, there's certainly been dramatic images watching people going to the polls in Iraq. We'll look forward to more of that in a moment. Campbell, also want to let you know, coming up this half hour, we'll look at the Michael Jackson trial. It finally gets underway this week. We're going to talk to Court TV's Diane Diamond, who's been covering this story from the outset about where things go when jury selection gets underway tomorrow morning in California. Campbell?
But first, let's turn back now to the Iraqi election. Both voters and candidates have been threatened with death, and insurgents have killed at least 5 people who are running for office here. And because of that, many candidates did not campaign openly. Many are not even named on the ballot, but others are campaigning and defying the threats, including some very courageous women.
I'll toss it back to you inside.
All right, Scene, thank you. Michael Jackson releasing a videotaped statement this morning on the eve of jury.
Here in President Bush's second term. And
nice and clean.
If you're like most men, shaving every morning is a chore. It can often be these products. Log on to our website at weekendtoday.msnbc.com. And we'll be right back. But first, this is Today on NBC. Let's take a moment now to check in with NBC's Tim Russert for a preview of Meet the Press. Tim, good morning.
Good morning, Lester. We'll go live to Baghdad, talk to NBC's Brian Williams. The election day in Iraq, the polls will close very shortly. What has happened? What will it mean for U.S. troops in Iraq? Then, his first television interview since the election, Senator John F. Kerry, the Democratic presidential nominee, is here on Meet the Press. We'll talk about Iraq, Social Security, his future, and that of the Democratic Party. All coming up right here, a special edition of Meet the Press, Lester.
All right, Tim, we'll see you shortly. Thanks very much. Now here's Campbell in Baghdad.
Thanks, Lester. I think it's important to remind people this is just the beginning of a process. What happened today was the election of a still temporary government that will write Iraq's new constitution. There is going to be another election next year when Iraqis will vote to elect a permanent government. For Iraqis and the U.S. military, it is likely to be a long and difficult year, and we wish them all the best of luck. Lester?
Safe journey home. We'll see you soon. And coming up tomorrow on Today, Unsung Heroes. A well-deserving family gets a big surprise. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you back here next weekend on Today.
Only on Today, an absolutely fabulous February. 2 mega Toyota concerts. Tina Turner struts her stuff, and Maroon 5 rocks the plaza. Then, ooh la la, a surprise Valentine treat for some lucky couples. And catch America's first family moonlighting, only on Today.
Democracy comes to Iraq. Stay with MSNBC as the votes are counted with up-to-the-minute live coverage from Baghdad. Iraq Votes, continuing coverage on MSNBC.
Countdown. MSNBC doesn't recycle its